Okay, we're going to get started. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us for today's first presentation of the virtual fair. Our presentation is Financial Aid Firsthand, and we are very, very happy to have such great guests here with us today. My name is Julie Gilbert, and I'm a Senior Education Debt Management Specialist with the AAMC. I'm excited to provide you with the resources that we can help you prepare for paying for medical school. I'm also joined by my colleague, Kristen Earle, who will be monitoring the Q&A box. So if you have any questions, that is where you will be able to post them for our panelists. And I'm really excited to have these amazing panelists with us today. We'll take a minute and have each panelist tell a little bit about themselves, and we'll start with Ashley.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ashley Vincent Acosta, and I am a rising MS3 student. So I'm currently in my second year of medical school, and I attend the Ponce Health Sciences University in Puerto Rico. So happy to be here.
And Dr. Favis.
Hi, my name is Roxanne. I am a recent graduate of anesthesia residency, and I'm currently in my fellowship in critical care medicine. And I'll be doing cardiac anesthesia next year, so I'm really excited.
And Dr. Robin.
Morning, everybody. My name is Emily Robin. I'm an attending physician in the emergency department at the Lurie Children's Hospital of Chicago. I did my medical school at Northwestern University. I did a residency in pediatrics, and I did a subspecialty fellowship in pediatric emergency medicine. I've been an attending physician for about 5 years.
Awesome. And Dr. Pasca.
Hi, my name is Ioana Pasca. I am professor and an associate program director at Riverside University Hospital, as well as at Loma Linda University in critical care and anesthesia. I did my medical school at UAMS, and I'm very honored to be here with you. I'm about 7 years out, so I've been through quite a bit of this process, and I'm very honored to be here today.
Thank you, everybody. So let's dive right in. There are so many resources that are out there to help you prepare for paying for medical school and financing medical school. And the FIRST program can help you. If you haven't checked it out, I hope you will do so. You can find us at amc.org/first. So Dr. Favis, can you tell us what financial resources did you use to help you understand how to pay for medical school?
So the financial resources I used was actually a lot of family help. And my mother had actually been saving for a long time, knowing that I would hopefully go to medical school. And I did know that there were resources available. I went to University of California, Irvine for college. And so being a public state school, there was many resources available.
Awesome, great, thank you. And knowing where to access financial resources to help with money management is also important, whether or not you're a pre-med student, a med student, or even a resident. And we do have those resources for you as well. As you plan for the expenses you'll incur when applying to medical school, just know that the AAMC's Financial Wellness Program is a free resource to everyone who needs assistance with understanding financial concepts. There's a lot of great content within this program, including tools and calculators to help you with budgeting and tracking your spending. So Ashley, did you know about the AAMC's Financial Wellness Program or even other similar debt management programs?
I knew about FIRST, and I actually I looked into the financial wellness program. I don't know if it had the same name when I was applying for medical school, because if you ask me now if I know about it, I didn't, but I did know about the budgeting tool and about the tools available at the AMC. I did read over them, although I didn't really put them into a lot of use, but yes, I was familiar with it.
You're absolutely right, Ashley. Our program before was called SALT. So it is new since you were first introduced to financial wellness. So great memory there. All right, so as you know, there are many costs associated with applying to medical school. Here's a sample of some of those costs. Thinking and planning for these expenses now will be very helpful to you as a pre-med student. As you can see, there's a number of things that you are going to have to pay for. There's a range of that cost. And then I have a sample cost here for you. So we're looking at $39.47 plus or minus. Dr. Pasco, what were your expected and unexpected expenses when applying to medical school?
So being a first-generation doctor, as well as an immigrant to the United States, I really was not very prepared for the expenses that came with applying for medical school. I had worked in undergrad. I worked during my summers when I was an undergrad student as well. And so I had saved up as much money as I could. But I really wasn't, unfortunately, aware of all of the expenses. There was quite a lot of application fees. There was a lot also with travel at the time. Fortunately, now with Zoom, a lot of those costs have gone away. And I've heard that billions of dollars have actually been saved of medical students and residents' money because we've gone to Zoom. So I'm very thankful for this platform that we've been able to create.
I agree. It is a very big cost savings to many. How about you, Dr. Favis? Did you encounter any surprises, or do you have any tips to consider when thinking about the cost of applying to medical school?
Yeah, so I would say when I was applying, a majority of it was actually unexpected. You spend so much of your concerns and worry about just getting it done and studying for it that you don't realize that all of this actually accrues, and especially if you think of like reapplying or applying for med school, or retaking the MCAT, that's almost doubling your costs. And so you really want to it's in your favor and it's cost effective to prepare for everything beforehand. Not only preparing to take the exam one time, but I think especially the interview process, there's your outfit, there's your food, your lodging, and everything like that, and that all adds up. So I think being prepared for it is probably the most helpful. And
thank you. So now I have some really great news to share with all of you that are attending, and that is that there is some assistance available. It is called the AMC's Fee Assistance Program, and it can provide financial resources for those who qualify. The benefits of the Fee Assistance Program can provide reduced or free resources that can really help save an applicant money. To find out if you qualify for the Fee Assistance Program, be sure to go to the Fee Assistance website at amc.org/FAP. Ashley, did you apply to any financial assistance programs like the AAMC's Fee Assistance Program?
I only remember applying. Can everyone hear me? My internet was having some issues. I only remember applying to the Fee Assistance Program, and I didn't qualify. However, I did tell a lot of my classmates to apply. And it was amazing because of the reduced cost for the MCAT and for the AMCAS application. So I encourage everyone just to try, even if you might think you don't, just try it out. And if you do, then it's amazing.
You're exactly right, Ashley. And actually, it only takes 5 to 10 business days to find out if you qualify. And as you saw, those benefits can be very helpful in saving people money. So as you start to think about the actual cost of medical school, sometimes the thought can be overwhelming. As you can see here, the median cost of attendance is different for public versus private schools. However, you should keep in mind that you don't have to borrow the full cost of attendance. To an extent, you can control some of your borrowing for things like room and board and some personal expenses. Just know that regardless of how much you borrow, you will be able to repay your loans. And as you can see here, even though the cost of attendance is $263 and $357 for private, not all students will borrow up to that cost of attendance. So Dr. Robin, did you encounter any financing barriers when you were attending medical school? And if so, what steps did you take to overcome them?
So I was in an interesting situation where I really did not prepare ahead of time for how I was going to pay for medical school. I literally borrowed every dollar that I qualified for. So it didn't feel like a barrier at the time because money was made available via loans. I did only loans. I didn't apply for any fee assistance. I did not apply for scholarship. I really didn't plan ahead very well. And I wouldn't recommend that. It ended up working out fine for me. Later, I wouldn't use the word barrier to describe what I experienced, but I did borrow the maximum amount of money that was available to borrow, and then worked with the public service loan forgiveness program to work it away after I graduated.
Great. And Dr. Favis, what about you? Did you have any financing hurdles?
I think the biggest financial hurdle was kind of what everyone's alluding to, is the unexpected expenses. My parents were able to help me through the undergrad process, and but actually for medical school, it got a little bit overwhelming, and so I had to take out new loans. And so entering kind of a stage where I wasn't familiar with, and just trying to understand like how to do things and the vocabulary and what is expected of me later on, I think were the biggest barriers. But it is, I would say, very tempting when money is made available to you to take it all out, but not really appreciating the kind of consequences or aftermath that you'll accrue afterwards.
Exactly, yes. Borrowing is great, but you do have to repay it, and with interest, and that can be very costly. So Ashley, did you have to deal with any financing bumps in the road?
It's funny because I feel I resonate a lot with Dr. Robin, exactly how she said it, like not knowing beforehand, maybe just taking out all the money. And I also didn't feel it was a barrier. I feel like I was made to know that if would have to take out loans. My family just stated it from the beginning when I started talking to them about financing school. Like, yes, we're there to support you, but economically we can't really help you out that much. So I just had to go out on my own. And like Dr. Favis said, the terminology was complicated. I had to take out notebooks and write everything down. So I guess the first barrier would be just getting familiar with the process, accepting the fact that you're taking out money and you have to pay for it afterwards. Budgeting, however, can be a very big barrier for a few students, especially when you're not used to it or you don't feel like you're very disciplined with it. What I encourage everyone is what I did was make a list of everything I thought I was going to be spending on and what I might, like, for example, maybe housing, living with a roommate. Some schools require transportation, food. I just put it all out on a notebook just to have this idea of what it might look like I would be spending. And once you have a number down, it may scare you, but it makes it more realistic. And it also creates this self-limiting, like it just limits you to your spending. And I think that's what I would recommend students, just being open to learning how you can, although it's hard, you can along the way learn how to manage it.
Exactly. And that is where the financial wellness program can come in and help people, because there is a budgeting tool within financial wellness, as well as a tracking your spending tool. So you can do that from your phone and try to keep yourself accountable for staying within your budget. So I think that's really a great idea. So when you apply for financial aid, you will receive an aid offer, just like many of the physicians and Ashley talked about here. You'll be told what you can borrow, what you're eligible to borrow, and you may be eligible for some grants or scholarships or even loans. The majority of medical students take out loans to fund their educational expenses. So Ashley, let's start with you. Since you borrowed financial aid, what was your experience with that process?
Like I mentioned, I think it was an intimidating process. I had never taken out loans ever, and you hear a lot of things about like how it in the future it accumulates. My situation was different in a lot of my upperclassmen in that I got into medical school in the pandemic, and they had put that zero interest rate. So right now, I don't feel that weight of the accrual of the interest rate. However, a lot of my previous friends, they do feel that. And so it's intimidating. And I guess it's just what I would say, what helped me get through that scary process was trying to educate myself as much as I could and reaching out to people when I needed the help.
Okay, great. I think that's very important. What about you, Dr. Pasco? What would you say was your experience with the financial aid process?
I feel like culturally, it was not very acceptable for me to take out loans, or especially large loans. So I did something very different. I actually worked throughout the entire process. Now, there are certain semesters that you absolutely cannot work, but there's plenty of summers and Christmas breaks, plenty of time before medical school that you can work. And then I found jobs that I could actually study while I was working. I actually worked at a organ donation center fielding calls from hospitals. And so in between calls, I was able to study as well as to keep my borrowing at a minimum. As well, I also applied for scholarships, and I received a very large scholarship at the beginning of my medical school training at UAMS. I then got a couple of Bs, and I thought I no longer I no longer would qualify for scholarships. Fortunately, a year later, I started applying for scholarships again, and I was really surprised that there's quite a lot of scholarships out there for medical students through your medical school. Doctors tend to be very generous and tend to give back in the form of scholarships, and are quite excited to be able to feed into the next generation of physicians. So I do recommend that you continue to apply for scholarships, even if maybe one semester you didn't receive a scholarship. Make sure that you continue to apply for those. And then I also would recommend something like having a CNA or being a scribe, so that when you do have some time, you can gain that medical experience, you can gain more of that medical language, as well as keeping your finances to a minimum.
Great, great. And how about you, Dr. Favis? What was your experience with borrowing and financial aid in general?
So I think the actual process of it and was a little overwhelming, but once you get the money, it seems pretty easy, because then it just like shows up in your bank account in a large sum. And I think not having that psychology of like budgeting money and kind of knowing how you're going to save for the remainder of the year. I actually thought that was the hard part, is just kind of learning how to do that, and understanding that this money is actually to not for me to really spend per se, but really to fund my education, that it has a purpose. And maybe then it seemed a little easier, but I think coming on this side where I'm starting to have to repay with like large amount is understanding now, what does consolidation mean? What does, how do like income like driven repayment plans, like how am I actually going to enter the repayment? This is, I think, where it gets a little bit overwhelming for me and how it's going to change. And so I think just like the investment you have in practicing like discipline kind of leads you so that this hopefully won't be overwhelming in this end.
Right. I think that's very good point. And thinking about the future, even when you're not there yet, can be helpful. Dr. Robin, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
I will say that I didn't do any scholarships. I didn't do any, what I think people would call aid. I only did loans. I only borrowed money from a bank. And that's money that they drop into your bank account. You can use it for whatever you want. If you don't want to use it for tuition, and I bought a car, I needed a car. I used it to pay my rent. I used it to pay for food. You can use the money for whatever you want. If you're borrowing money from a bank, you just need to know what you're going to do with your money. So for me, I really only went like to me, what felt like a very simple, straightforward route was just borrow a ton of money from one source and then figure it out later. And I'm not saying that was a great plan, but I will say it worked out well for me in the end. But I think I would just echo what all the others have said, which is that although it is overwhelming, it's totally worth it. And depending on what medical school you go to, there are people who work for your medical school whose sole job it is to help you with this. So don't let this the word overwhelm has come up a couple times, and it is overwhelming, but there are people whose job it is to help you manage it. So don't let the overwhelm discourage you from moving forward.
Right. Asking for help when you need it and going to the financial aid office early and often probably could be very beneficial for you. Of course, scholarships can really help. As you heard from Dr. Pasco, the more scholarships you receive, the less you will likely need to borrow. So some schools have institutional scholarships, but some have limited scholarship funds. You may need to look for other scholarship opportunities from various resources like the ones that you see here. You should start the process by talking to the financial aid staff at the schools you're interested in attending. And I would even go further and say, you really need to look at the financial aid website of the schools that you're interested in attending, because that's where you're going to see all of the financing options. Dr. Pasca, I know you said you searched for scholarships and you were lucky enough to receive multiple scholarships. Would you recommend any particular scholarships or any particular way of searching for those scholarships?
I spent a considerable amount of time searching the web for scholarships and applying and writing essays for national scholarships. I didn't receive any feedback or anything back from those scholarships. I think the pool was just so large. But locally, there were quite a few community, organizations that offered scholarships. And I feel like those organizations are getting more and more, both a local state as well as local city scholarships, where people are looking to invest into the future, because we're really excited about you guys, caring for us and our patients and being part of this amazing medical community. So we really want to pay it forward into you, and you'd be surprised at how many scholarships are out there. Also network, make sure that you're networking with physicians in your community. See if you can join some of these local groups, maybe your city medical group or your state medical group. And so network with them, and I'm sure that they'll have more resources for you as well.
Great, thank you. And Dr. Robin, I know you said that you didn't apply for any scholarships. In hindsight, have you heard of others, or have you thought or heard about other scholarship opportunities that you would recommend?
Yeah, I realized partway through med school that every single one of my peers had at least looked into scholarships. It was just kind of something people weren't talking about, but they were just doing anyway. So I don't have any names of particular scholarships, no. But what I will say is that, like you said, the financial aid website for whatever school you are either accepted to or applying to is going to either have a link or a list or whatever, and it'll give you the very clear criteria of what you need to do to apply for it. I wish I had done that. That would have been very, very smart. And you could start looking into that even before you're accepted to medical school. You probably can't necessarily apply to all scholarships until you're actually into a school, because you need to, demonstrate that you have a scholarship need, but you could start looking into it at any time. And it just wasn't on my radar. I didn't go to a conference like this, so I really didn't even know to look for it.
Right. And that, I think that happens a lot. You don't know what you don't know, right? So just take advantage of all the resources that you can, and take advantage of what's available through the school as well. I think that's excellent information. There are a ton of things to take a look at. We even have a number of resources on the AAMC's website that will help you as well. Now, many medical students borrow, as you've heard, and they borrow from the federal government through programs called direct unsubsidized and direct plus loans. However, some borrowers don't qualify for federal funding, so they might need to turn to private loans, like from a bank or a credit union. Some schools may also offer institutional loans with attractive benefits and terms because they're offered by the school. They're institutional loans. There are some schools that are able to offer student loans through the Health Resources and Services Administration, or HRSA. And these are loan programs that are low interest, but they're for specific students, such as loans for disadvantaged students or students that are interested in primary care. There's a primary care loan. No matter what loan programs you're planning to use to fund your medical school expenses, it's important to understand how the loans work and what your options will be to repay the loans. Dr. Pasca, now that your medical school education is complete, how do you go about managing your everyday expenses, including any student loans that you might have or had?
So some of the best advice I received was to continue living like a resident for a couple of years, and then you can have your loans paid off very quickly. Now, I have some friends who are in this 10-year loan forgiveness program. I like anesthesia because I like things to be done pretty quickly. So for me, that was a really long-term thing. It was much simpler for me to continue living like a resident for a couple of years, not buy that big house, not buy that expensive car yet, and then just pay off my student loans and move on to the next thing. To me, that was the more simpler thing. But I know now, looking at resources, there's so many resources that probably if I would have known about them, I wouldn't have been as scared about this process. In California, we have a loan forgiveness program. There's also the federal loan forgiveness program. There's a lot of other resources. And quite honestly, your income goes up significantly, which was not something I was really prepared for, and didn't realize, hey, this is going to be okay. But I'm really thankful because I actually was able to pay off my loans very quickly, having kept my expenses down, having worked throughout, and then just living like a resident for a couple of years.
Excellent. Yeah, I agree. We use that term often, live like a resident when you're not. So that way you can get where you want to be financially. Dr. Favis, you're currently a fellow. How are you managing your student loans? And do you have any financial tips for managing finances during this time when you're still working and training and you haven't actually, been able to pay off a whole lot of your loans yet?
Yeah, so for the time being, as a fellow, like every year in your training, you'll incrementally like make more money. But as a fellow, you're still making way below you would as an attending. And so for right now, I'm what they refer to as like deferring full loan payments. And so that means you're just postponing, but at the same time, you're accruing interest. So there is like a pro and con to that. But for as far as like my everyday expenses, and especially me, I'm preparing a move from, Boston, Massachusetts to California. So it's a lot that you have to prepare for. So I think one of the best tips that I've gotten actually this year was that, you plan for these expenses and you save for them, actually, like decide how much am I going to put away like every month so that when I do have to make this like $10,000 move, I'm already set. And that way it doesn't seem like, oh, you're spending $10,000 at once, but you're already ready for it. And, that includes preparing an emergency fund for, when you have to like finally start paying for taxes or something like that. So I think that is a good kind of practice that I wish I had been doing from the beginning.
Yeah, I think that's great. Everybody manages their loans differently. So as you're doing with that forbearance or deferment, that's best for you. And I think that's important for people here to know, is that you don't necessarily have to pay your loans during residency. Is it to your advantage? Yes, it depends upon what your repayment strategy is. But for people that are in areas like Dr. Favis, Boston is a very high cost of living area, right? And you may not have the ability to do it even if you want to. So, just keeping that in mind. And Ashley, I'm going to ask you as well, as a student, do you find it difficult to manage your everyday finances?
I think what Dr. Favis said about I got that same advice of trying to just make this budget for emergencies. And I've always done that. I'm also strictly loans. I feel like I'm following in Dr. Rowan's footsteps. I try looking for scholarships. I guess that's where we differ, but I'm only with loans. And what I do is like, yes, you just get this chunk of money in your bank and it can be tempting. So what I do is like, it's like I block one eye and I'm like, okay, yes, this is the amount of money I have, but I'm only going to spend this percentage. So I know that what's left over, I can use it if anything. I also got a car. I'm also paying rent. So these are expenses that I wrote on my list and I said, this is the money I have to spend, but I also need to live and eat. So let me just put aside some and try. I live in Puerto Rico. I also worked before medical school, so I had some savings. I didn't go straight from undergrad to medical school. I worked, I saved up a little bit for emergencies as well. I went to summer programs that they give you some, they pay you for research. I also saved up. So anywhere I got some sort of income, I would always try to save just a little bit for just in case situations. So that has been my experience.
Very good. Yeah, oftentimes people need to put some monies in a savings account or even a different bank account. So it's out of sight, out of mind, so there's lots of different tricks for managing money. I think that's great. And there are some really great programs that can assist borrowers with loan repayment assistance or even loan forgiveness. One of the wonderful programs that is out there now is a federal program called Public Service Loan Forgiveness. This federal program provides loan forgiveness to borrowers who have direct loans, make 120 qualifying payments, while working for a nonprofit qualifying employer. After the borrower completes these requirements, they can have the remainder of their loan balance forgiven. And it's a tax-free forgiveness, which is awesome. It's a really wonderful program. And we are so excited to have Dr. Robin here to talk with you about her experience with this program. So Dr. Robin, can you please tell us what was your experience and would you recommend it to others? And please just take the floor.
Short answers. What was my experience? Excellent. Would I recommend it? Yes. So here's how it works. Just like you said, if you have qualifying loans and you work for a qualifying employer and you make 120 on-time payments, that's 10 years, your loans can be forgiven. Many hospitals and medical systems will qualify. And you can contact the PSLF and find out if your place of employment qualifies. Most academic institutions qualify. Private companies don't. So like a private practice wouldn't qualify. The way that it works is that after you graduate from medical school and you start in your residency, you start the application process. You fill out the initial application. It's not very long. It's basically just asking you how much money do you owe and who are you and where do you work? And then they get back to you and tell you whether you qualified or not. And you need to consolidate all of your loans into one so that it can all be together as one payment, and you go on an income-based or income contingent repayment plan. So I'm just going to, full disclosure, I'm going to tell you the exact numbers, okay? The place where I went to medical school, tuition was $40,000 per year. I budgeted to myself another $20,000 per year that I thought I might need for expenses. That was $60,000 per year that I borrowed for 4 years. So at the end of medical school, I owed $240,000. Over time, that interest does accrue. My total balance was over $300,000. How could I possibly pay that back during residency? Like on a regular loan repayment plan, it would have been like $3,000 a month. It would have been the 99% of my salary, but they don't expect you to do that. They put you on an income-based repayment. So if you're only making a few $1,000s a month, they're not going to ask you to pay a few $1,000s a month for loans. My initial loan repayments were $75, literally $75 to $100 per month was all I was paying toward my loan repayments for the first couple of years. And like Dr. Favis said, as you progress in your training, you start making a tiny bit more money each year. So every year my loan payment went up a tiny bit, a tiny bit, a tiny bit. Then when I became an attending, my loan monthly payment went up a little bit more. It ended up going up quite a bit because they count your total income. By then I was married and we had a dual income. So I was paying closer to like $2,200 a month. But by then our combined family income was plenty to be able to pay that much. And you make your payment on time every single month. You do it by direct deposit, so you don't even have to remember to send in a check. And every single year, you reapply to verify that you are, not reapply, but recertify that you are still working at a qualified type of healthcare facility. And after 10 years, you fill out the application that says, I believe I've completed all 120 payments. What do you think? And they send you an email that says, congratulations, your loan balance is $0. So I paid on time for 120 on-time payments. There was well over $250,000 still left on my balance, and all of it was forgiven.
That had to be an awesome experience, and to know that that amount was forgiven and you did everything that you needed to, because that is one thing that we find is that people don't meet all of the criteria and then, knock themselves out of a qualifying payment.
Sure. And if you don't meet the criteria because the type of loan you got or the type of place you're working doesn't qualify, that's one thing. But don't knock yourself out because you just didn't fill out the application in time or because you forgot to recertify that you work for the correct type of place. It is really not difficult. It's like a one-page thing that you fill out every fall. At least for me, it was in the fall, that you just get the person from your residency program or your fellowship program or your hospital to sign saying, yes, indeed, this person works here. That's all you had to do. The website for the PSLF, it has really come a long way in the last 10 years. So every single day, if you want, you could log in and see how many qualifying payments have I made. They have like a little ticker. It's very exciting. You can see how far along you are. So I would highly recommend looking into getting the type of loans that will work for this, and consider for the 10 years after you graduate med school, working only for the type of place that would qualify for this. And again, it's a lot of types of hospitals and medical centers that would qualify. And if you think about it, I did 3 years of residency, 3 years of fellowship. So I really only had to kind of limit myself where I was working for 4 years after training, and where I wanted to work qualified anyway.
Exactly. That's the one thing a lot of times people don't realize is all the places that do qualify. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Dr. Robin. So I'm going to give each panelist an opportunity to answer this next question now. If you had to complete the financial process all over again, what would you change, if anything? And we'll start with Dr. Robin.
If I had to do this all over again, I think I would have just tried to be more prepared. I would have just look at the websites. Try not to let yourself get overwhelmed with it. Just give yourself a few minutes a day to just look, to just read about it, and to just try to learn about it. I think talking to other people who've gone through it can be really helpful. But just remember that everybody's situation is going to be totally different. Dr. Pasca said she was able to repay her loans back really quickly. For me, that was never going to be an option. So you got to get lots of different perspectives. I wish I had been a little more prepared, and I wish I had looked into scholarships. And one thing that I did that I would do again was I was real close with the financial aid person at Northwestern University, where I went to medical school. I checked in with her frequently just to make sure that I was doing it right. Again, this is her job. Her job is to help me with this. And I'm glad that I utilized her as a resource.
I'm so glad you said that, Dr. Robin, because, and sometimes in undergraduate study, it's difficult to go to the financial aid office. I know personally, I ended up leaving there crying most of the time. But as a medical student, there's often a dedicated person to really help you through the process. And it's important to make connections with them. So I'm really glad you said that.
It's also okay to cry about it. It is overwhelming. It's okay to shed a couple of tears. You'll get through it, and it's totally worth it.
That's right. Exactly. Dr. Favis, what do you think? Would you change anything? Would you make any different choices?
Yeah, so I think to sort of echo is just being prepared and understanding that unfortunately every step of the process does require a lot of finances, but it's doable. And I think I think if I had to do it all over again, one is being prepared, and it's just exactly like the students who are doing here, is joining as many conferences, especially free conferences that are available to you. And also just, like Dr. Robin, maybe developing relationships with the people, because you're so worried about everything else, just studying and passing your classes, that though it doesn't feel like a burden, I feel like it just is like a devil on your shoulder all the time. It's there, it's present, but there's people like you, Julie, who are here to kind of just take that burden off of you and help you understand everything. And so I think knowing that there are people available to help you, and it's probably just ends up being like a quick email, am I doing everything correctly, and am I understanding this right? And I think and also if you yourself want to be informed, is just slowly kind of getting yourself in there. There's a lot of podcasts, there's a lot of simple books that are targeted towards physicians entering practice, entering fellowship, and so that there's and actually they end up being physicians themselves who have gone through this process, and this is what I would recommend, and this is the kind of process that has helped me be successful. And I think just always appreciating that the discipline that you serve yourself in the beginning will just benefit you in the long run. So remembering that everything is doable. It is overwhelming, but it is doable. And these are things that I would change again. But do I regret the way I did it? Not necessarily, because it got me to a very fulfilling job that, I didn't do it for the money. It just happens to work out that way.
Right. Good. Great. Yes, I think that's awesome. What about you, Ashley? I know you haven't graduated yet, but what are some things looking in hindsight, even as a rising M3? Is there anything you would change? Or do you plan on doing differently moving forward, perhaps?
This conference is has changed my perspective in a lot of things. I'm just very grateful to have been here and have heard the stories of diverse doctors. Like pre-meds here are already getting great advice before getting into medical school. It's going to help them a lot. I'm in medical school and I feel the information I'm getting today will help me with my remaining 2 years. So, starting the process, I do feel maybe I would have stuck more to the information. I feel it would be a lot, and I did read and I tried to take advantage of a lot of the resources, but then I would just kind of give up. I did like, okay, I read enough. This is fine. I think I'll work with this. So I guess I did what I could at the time with the information I had. So I don't regret what I did in the past. However, I feel it's not too late to just keep learning, keep using tools. I'm a medical student. I'm hearing the stories of these doctors and I'm mentally taking notes as to what I will do moving on in the future. I have taken a lot of loans as per now, and moving forward, I know now how to modify, I guess, my, me taking out loans in the future. So yes, I wouldn't necessarily change anything in the past. I did what I had to do with the information, but I will change a few of my strategies moving on in the future as a medical student.
Great, thank you. Thanks for sharing that. And Dr. Pasca, how about you? Let's see what you have to say. I know you were fortunate to have a lot of scholarships, but is there anything you would do differently?
So, I agree that we've had just a brilliant panel of people today. And I think the word that has come up over and over again is overwhelmed. And I think what I had to learn early on was how to, and I'm still learning this, how to make sure that I'm using my time, energy, resources, and my emotional energy to make sure that I'm getting the most out of medicine. And the most out of medicine, I think, to me, includes making sure that I'm really enjoying the medicine and the relationships with these amazing patients and other providers that I'm getting to learn from, the educators that I'm getting to learn from, the the people in human resources, the people in the medical school, the deans, who are all there really for you. And so how do we get the most from each of those people, whether it's you working or not working, taking out loans or not taking out loans? Ultimately, I just want to encourage all of you to make the most of it and really not to let this process overwhelm you. I heard a really great talk about the path to where we're supposed to be. And this person was particularly a chair of anesthesia. And she was saying that the path sometimes is straight, but usually it has little divots, and it's a different path for each person. And it's totally okay for that path to be completely different for you. Don't let it overwhelm you. Make sure that you're getting the most out of every single encounter, every single lecture, every single test. I mean, the amount of information and language that you're going to learn during these next few years of medical school, 10 to 15,000 new words that you're going to get to learn. So make sure that you get to see all the different aspects and the depth of and the richness of what medicine really offers you, and try not to let this process overwhelm you, because in the end, it will be just fine.
Exactly. Thank you so much. So last question I have for all of you, then we'll take some from the audience. What financial tips or advice would you share with those thinking about applying to medical school? Is there anything in particular about the application process as far as finances go? Let's start with Dr. Pasca. Is there anything that you could suggest?
I agree. Mentors, as many mentors as you can find, and building those close relationships early on with your medical doctors, local physicians, as well as the medical school itself. That's probably the thing that will help you the most to manage your finances and get new tips and tricks for the local community.
Great. And Ashley, what about you?
I second what Dr. Pasca said. I remember a conversation I had with, I was in a summer program, and I was telling him about applying to medical school and how the financial process was really concerning. And he was very straightforward, and he was like, Ashley, you're going to be a doctor. You will be able to pay these loans. You just read everything, read between the lines, get as much help as you can, but you will be able to pay these loans eventually, even though it might take you some time. And I think that reassurance really helped me, because I feel everyone says medical school is expensive, and a lot of people come from different backgrounds. There are no doctors in my family. I would be the first doctor in my family. So for me, just hearing that was sort of a motivation booster, and and it's not only just hearing it, like also look for the information, look for help, never be afraid to reach out. And that's what I've kept doing. So yeah, I definitely just encourage everyone to seek for help. Just ask the questions, even if you feel the question might not be as important. It is, because it's about your education, it's about your life, it's about your career. So any questions matter, and don't be afraid to ask them. That's what I would tell everyone.
Excellent advice. Thank you, Ashley. What about you, Dr. Favis? Any financial tips?
So I think, so for financial tips, I think just practically, just, prepare to do everything once. And so that means giving it your best and preparing the most. Because, if you're like, I probably took the MCAT maybe 2 or 3 times, but, that ends up accruing costs. But if maybe I had better prepared for the MCAT, and worked for a better score, that not only saves you more tests that you have to take, but financially it helps. So try to focus on applying to medical school once, and working to have that flexibility to be selective in the medical schools that you apply to, so that you can apply to as many medical schools as you want, but then you'll be starting to be limited by cost. So I think that would be my practical advice. But just when looking back, throughout this whole process, I've actually never felt like my life has been on pause for say the time commitment that medical school takes, or the financial commitment that this path takes. I've never actually felt like my life was on hold in any way, because we're saying that you will be eventually able to pay off all these loans. But I think you just find so much fulfillment and so much of growth in yourself when going through this whole thing. So whatever it costs, it's an investment in yourself, and it's totally worth it.
Yes, I totally agree. It is certainly an investment in yourself, and it will be able to be repaid. What about you, Dr. Robin? Do you have any financial tips regarding the application process itself?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think anywhere that you can cut costs is great. Obviously, you can't cut costs on the application itself or on the MCAT, but in terms of when you're traveling places to go for interviews, take any opportunity to stay with friends, or most medical schools I applied to offered that you could stay for free with a current medical student while you were in town interviewing. Definitely do that. I know it sounds so silly, but don't buy airport food every single time you're flying someplace. Cut costs where you can when you're in the application process, and you can really reduce a lot of your spending. Also, depending on what situation you're in terms of your grades and your MCAT scores, you don't necessarily need to apply to 30 medical schools. I think I applied to 11, and that was expensive. I really tried to focus on where I really, really wanted to go, where I felt like was going to be a good plan in case I didn't get into where I wanted to go. And applying to 30 schools isn't going to be helpful. You need to cast a wide enough net, but don't waste money just scrambling to try and get in anywhere. That's my personal advice, is try and hone that a little bit and cut some of those costs and utilize anything free that they're willing to give you.
Excellent. So that means go for financial presentations that are going to be free and offer you pizza as well in medical school. Is that correct?
I have mixed feelings about pizza, but yes, there are a lot of free lunches and free breakfasts. To your point, there are a lot of, free opportunities to just meet with people, to be able to ask questions. I can see the Q&A box is like filling up with questions. And I know that we're not going to get to everything, but that doesn't mean that your questions aren't good ones. There are people, whether it's right now in this panel or other people that you meet with, you can get all of these questions answered. But yeah, if they're going to offer you a free granola bar, take it and put an extra one in your backpack.
Exactly. So we're going to turn it over to Kristen now, and she's going to let us know what questions have come in for the audience. So we'll go ahead and take those from all of our panelists. Go ahead, Kristen.
Great. Thank you, Julie. We do have a lot of questions in the queue, so we'll try to move through them quickly. A lot of questions related to scholarships, specifically the availability of need-based scholarships at medical schools, and also when should one start applying for financial aid and scholarships?
So I can answer that. So it's actually a pretty seamless process as you start going into your medical school once you've gotten accepted. The first few days, there's going to be lots of applications that you'll be filling out, lots of meetings you have with financial aid. They have lots of scholarships that are not necessarily even need-based. Some are merit-based, and actually some are based on community service. Some are based out of local places of religion or of congregation. There's a lot of different reasons that people want to give scholarships out. And so I was really surprised. At my school, you just applied a very general application. You put down what you'd been involved in lately, and then they just surprised me with random scholarships that I didn't know I even could qualify for. The other thing that there's PhD programs that also offer scholarships through that. If you're interested in research, it's an amazing way. Actually, now I'm kind of thinking, oh, maybe I should have done an MD, PhD. But your school will actually help you as you've gone through this process to start applying for these.
Great, we'll move on to our next question. So this is one for our physician panelists, a question around elaborating on what living like a resident looks like in terms of budgets and managing finances.
I think that one's directed towards me again, because I use that term, living like a resident. So as a resident, you get about $50,000 a year. As an attending, that's going to go up 4, 5, maybe more, depending on what your specialty is. So basically, you're continuing to budget like you did before. You don't buy you still continue with your Toyota for a little bit longer. You still continue in your little home that you've had, and you don't buy the really expensive toys yet. And so basically now your income is 4 times what it used to be, but you're still living on $50,000.
That goes for students too, right? So Ashley, if you can continue living like a student while you're a resident, then think about how much more income you'll have, right? Have you started thinking about that?
I have. I really have. I have heard the living as a resident. I mean, like living as a resident after you finish residency and living like a medical student when you're trying to cut costs. I found it so funny when Dr. Robin said like pick a granola bar and like stash another one away. I do that with the sandwiches, with everything. Anywhere you get free food, take another one. Sometimes that food goes bad and they throw it away. Just take the other one without any remorse. So yeah, definitely gonna live like a medical student or like a residency, like a resident for a while.
I think it comes down to like making a budget, especially for stuff that you really can cut costs on, like coffee. At our medical school, there was a little, I mean, it wasn't particularly tasty coffee, but it was free coffee in the admissions office. You could save hundreds of dollars a year not purchasing coffee. Little things like that can really, when it adds up, it makes a difference. Like maybe your family will let you stay on their cell phone plan so that you don't have to pay for your own. Maybe you don't drive your car that much so you can get cheaper auto insurance because you're driving under 10,000 miles a year. Like really looking into cost cutting things. You don't need magazine subscriptions anymore. Somebody had asked in the chat about books. Any book you can borrow, any book that you can get online through your medical school's library website. You asked earlier about any regrets. I regret buying all the books that they recommended. That was not necessary. Those were all available electronically. I wish I had bought almost 0 books.
Oh, I want to jump into that. So right now, the food, the amount of money that goes into food when you eat out instead of meal prepping, it's a lot. I try to meal prep as much as I can. There are moments when the semester just gets really tough and there's no way for me to meal prep. So I just try to eat out. But about the books and the resources you need when studying in medical school, right now, the popularity isn't as much as buying books. A lot of the books, you can get them in PDF. It's the studying resources. There are things, I don't know if anyone has heard of them, things called Board and Beyond, the UWorld question bank, the sketchy medical videos. A lot of medical students now are using those tools to learn the amount of content that is being thrown at us during medical school. And that costs a lot of money. So I didn't know that when I got into medical school. Do you necessarily need it? Well, no. Years before, medical students didn't have those sources and they passed medical school and they're doctors today. But the popularity and the trend now to make studying easier is investing in those resources. So having that in mind, which is something I didn't have in mind, which is really useful for me right now in my medical education, maybe knowing about it beforehand would have prepared me a little bit more during the financial process.
Great. Thank you all for those helpful insights. I think we have time for one final question. And this one may be for Julie, but we'll throw it out to the other panelists as well. When do you start repaying your student loans? Is it after or during residency?
I will be happy to answer that. You can pay your loans anytime you want because you're allowed to do that. However, normally you will have a 6-month grace period after you graduate from medical school. You can choose to pay during that time, but again, you're not required. Then after that 6 months is over, that's when you will either choose to go into a repayment plan, like many of the income-driven repayment plans talked about here, or you will choose to do a medical residency forbearance and not be required to pay during your residency. So there are lots of options, and there's a lot of information on the FIRST website about loan repayment and options. And I encourage you all to come to the booth. We have a booth at the AMC Hall. So today, if you find that you have some questions about financial aid, I hope you'll join us. Come on over, stop and ask us some questions. But before we let you go, I just personally want to thank every single panelist here for your time and the assistance that you've given to everybody that is participating in today's webinar. So thank you very much.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you so much. I just want to take the time to appreciate the fact that all the panelists were female physicians, and that is very, very it's incredibly motivating and inspiring to see you all. So thank you so much for just being a part of this. And I'll thank you for all the tips, which are amazing. And I definitely took those mental notes.
Well, I hope everybody has a great day, and we will see you at the fair. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you so much for having us.
Quite welcome. Thank you.